Although Eddie's trip to Texas has been confirmed by 911, I had doubts about Buck's feelings after watching the last episode of Season 8. The close friendship between Eddie and Buck, who have been played by Ryan Guzman and Oliver Stark since 911 Season 2, frequently feels like the most intimate bond either character has. After 911 Season 7's finale, Eddie's relationship with his son Christopher is regrettably considerably more strained. Since the father intends to relocate to Texas in order to reunite with his son, Eddie's 911 departure can only be attributed to himself. Despite all of the severe emergencies that the 118 responds to on 911, internal disputes frequently have a long-lasting effect on the lengthy procedural. Buck will soon be left alone to deal with his feelings regarding Eddie's departure, just as Eddie is struggling with his son living in Texas. Buck tries to persuade Eddie, the viewers, and even himself that he's glad Eddie moved to Texas, but his logic exposes the unpleasant reality of Eddie's departure, which 911 Season May 9th examine. No place compares to home, but Texas isn't Eddie's home. The tense relationship between Eddie and Christopher is the main focus of 911 Season 8 from the very beginning, but nothing happens until the mid-season finale, when Eddie tells Buck that he's considering moving to Texas. That possibility becomes a reality in 911 Season 8, Episode 9, which centers on Eddie's quest to find a tenant for his house. The dog's real family takes him away after Buck first snaps and adopts a stray in this episode. Texas is not the ideal location for them to get back together, even though it is undeniable that Eddie belongs in Christopher's life. Eddie Begins, Season 3, Episode 15. Eddie's backstory episode was one of his first near-death experiences in 911. The terrifying episode and all of Eddie's statements regarding his time in Texas demonstrate that, in 911, Eddie's negative recollections of his hometown greatly exceed his positive ones. In addition to providing an explanation for Eddie's late wife's departure, Eddie Begins demonstrates the full scope of Eddie's parents' emotional manipulation, a topic that is more pertinent than ever today. Perhaps as awful as Buck's parents are Eddie's own Helena, Paula Marshall, and Ramon, George Del Hoyo, whose mistakes continue to haunt Eddie well into adulthood. 911 proved that Ramon forced Eddie to be the man of the house before he was even a man, instilling in him a sense of toxic masculinity at an early age. Ramon had the grace to acknowledge his mistake, but Helena guilt-trips Eddie whenever she can, even in the 7th season finale of 911, when she persuades him to allow them to take Christopher to Texas. Helena and Ramon do not care about their son. Instead, they take advantage of Eddie when he is at his weakest and do not sympathize with him as he faces difficulties with his son in Texas. Although Christopher may not be old enough to comprehend the circumstances completely, Eddie has little chance of mending his relationship with Christopher unless they are far from meddling due to Helena and Ramon's hidden agenda. Finally facing his parents for their failures could be one positive outcome of Eddie's 911 exit. In contrast to Eddie's wholesome family in the 118, Helena and Ramon are poisonous. Viewers seem to understand that Eddie is not a Texas native, so I'm hopeful that 911 will quickly make Eddie, and Buck for that matter, realize that. Apart from more ethereal justifications for going back to LA, such as the potential romance between Eddie and Buck in 911, California is where Eddie and Christopher belong. When Eddie moves to Texas, he will undergo a significant change that should serve as a wake-up call to what he truly wants out of life and, more importantly, what he does not want for himself and his child. Although an Eddie replacement is set up for 911 Season 8, it's only a short-term fix. The 118 is an essential part of Eddie's life, and Eddie cannot live without the team. After living in Texas for a while, Eddie will most likely realize how important his life in California is and return home to Los Angeles with Christopher by his side. Eddie, Christopher, and Buck are an unavoidable family that will eventually be reunited, but 911 still needs to come up with a satisfactory solution to their conflict.